everybody wants to talk about it.
Are there more counselors coming?
Okay, focus, let me know when you're ready, and we'll get started. Good to go? Okay. Thank you, everybody. Good evening. We're going to call this Committee of the Whole of the Springfield City Council to order. The time is 5:31. Today is Monday, June 17th. And we have some meetings later on this evening and some proclamations, but I've called this Committee of the Whole meeting this evening to talk about the subject of residency as a requirement of employment under the Springfield City Ordinances and the impacts that is having on a variety of human resources issues that we've seen exacerbated in the city in recent years. And just by way of background, the current residency ordinance that we have in effect in its most recent form was passed in 1996 by then attorney Bill Boyle being the primary sponsor of that, and through a variety of amendments and subsequent enforcement efforts that took place in the years that followed, we have the system that we have today. I'll speak from my personal experience about this. I was elected to the City Council in 2010 and was and remain a vocal advocate of residency requirements in the city. Myself and some other colleagues drafted some amendments to the ordinance over the years to achieve a greater degree of enforcement. And after what I would say are probably somewhere in the range of 5 to 6 amendments that happened in those years, we have the current system that we have. So using my own words only, I will summarize the current rules as they stand, and obviously there'll be some substantial overgeneralizations here, but just so that we're all sort of operating with similar sets of facts and data, let me just start by reciting my understanding of how the ordinance works now. Residency is a requirement for new employees of every classification across the city and across all of the city's municipal departments. If you are in a non-bargaining unit, the requirement stipulates that upon new employment, the employee can have up to 1 year to move into the city in order to comply. So if you live in a surrounding community and you want to accept a new job with the city, you can do it and comply with the residency ordinance as long as you agree to move in within 12 months of your date of hire. There's also some nuanced and particular rules. The police department and the fire department have similar rules for their patrolmen and firemen's union, which require the first 10 years of residency in the city, which is specific and unique to those collective bargaining units. But all of the other collective bargaining units in the city have one by one adopted the residency ordinance through collective bargaining and through contract concessions over the years. There are also specific requirements that stipulate that new hires of deputy department heads and department heads must comply with the residency ordinance, and that waivers are not available for those folks in the way that they were previously available. And the waiver process is clearly spelled out, and counselors may have noticed over the last few years there's notices that you'll receive, and that's because of some changes that we made a few years ago to the requirement. And basically the way it works now is you post the job, and if you can't find someone who's qualified to step forward, who complies or is willing to comply with the residency ordinance within 12 months of the date of hire, then you have to repost the position for a second time. At that point, if the department head wishes to request a waiver, the department head can request a waiver of the mayor. The mayor can notify the council of an intent to grant a waiver, and then the position is reposted for a period of time. I can't recall if it's 7 or 14 days, but there's a subsequent posting requirement, and we found that over time that has been helpful to allow that tool to exist for non-department heads and non-deputy department heads, but it also can create a burden and some disparate outcomes and disparate treatment, because you've got some employees with waivers and others who, are hired, and now that they're currently an employee, there is no mechanism in the ordinance to get a waiver if you're an existing employee. It's only available to new hires. So those are some of the high-level points about how the residency ordinance works. About 2 years ago, we had the Residency Compliance Commission appointed for the first time that was charged with enforcing this ordinance. I've served on it since then. I see Drew Primanti is also here, and Clerk Oyola Lopez is also here, who are members of that commission. We meet once a month. We review compliance with the residency ordinance. We conduct hearings and find facts when appropriate, when there are questions of fact regarding someone's residency. And speaking for myself as a member, I think that the introduction of that commission has led to a lot more overall compliance and a lot better data to track exactly how we're doing with compliance. And when we started this process, when I started getting involved in this process in 2010, it was a very, very different picture. There was a lot of poor record keeping, not a lot of records as to who had waivers and how long they were for. People hadn't for years filed residency compliance certificates, and now that happens annually through the residency compliance unit. So that's sort of my synopsis of the rule and how we ended up to the current circumstance. The reason for this meeting today is that over the course of the last year plus, the council and specifically the Residency Compliance Commission has heard time and again about issues concerning recruitment and how much of an impairment the residency rule is on recruitment for city municipal departments. And at a recent commission meeting, department heads were invited to come and testify and provide some of their experiences to the Residency Compliance Commission about how this ordinance is impacting them and how they see the future of their department as a result of it. And based on sort of the compelling nature of that testimony, I felt it was important that the full city council have a similar opportunity to hear from the department heads about the real impacts that the residency ordinance is having on recruitment. With that said, I've invited the municipal departments. There's quite a few people here who I understand would wish to speak about it and some of the impacts that it has on them and their department and their experiences, and we'd invite everyone to do that. But right before I proceed with that portion of the meeting, I just want to be clear specifically to all the counselors that there's no proposal at this time. There's no suggested remedy. This is intended to be a discussion so that we can assess whether or not the problem is something we'd like to explore doing something about, and if so, what that action might be. But at this point, there's no pending proposal to eliminate or alter the residency ordinance in any way. So with that, we do have quite a few folks from municipal departments here who'd like to speak. But before we do that, are any questions or comments from counselors about anything I just said? Councilor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've always supported residency, and every time it comes up, it's always a battle. And one of the things that I've always worried about, is it fair? Because I think anything we do has to be fair across the board. And I myself have received many letters and concerns about being able to fill job positions, and I would always be for Springfield residents first, but I'm I'm willing to listen to see if there's something we can do to all work together.
Thank you, Councilor Walsh. And I should just also recognize the councilors who are in attendance. Myself, Councilor Fenton, Councilor Walsh, Councilor Delgado, Councilor Edwards are attending in person. Councilors Govan, Allen, Santinello, and Whitfield, as well as Councilor Perez and Click Bruce and Councilor Davila are participating remotely. I don't think I missed anybody, but if I did, please speak up. Councilor Govan, you have a question or comment before we get started?
Just a comment, I guess. Thank you for that explanation and that history of the residency requirement ordinance. I am in agreement that I think a city like ours needs residency requirements, and I would love for us to continue to find ways for us to continue, having them and being able to fill the positions that we have available. I'll look into the solutions later, but I was just rereading or re-listening to The Color of Law, and in that book, it delineates, all the reasons why some cities like Springfield or Holyoke or Chicopee are in the state that they're in. So I want us to just be very cautious about, thinking about changing anything. I think we need to look at solutions. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Govan. Those are all good points. Okay, so seeing no other councilors, who would like to go first?
Ladies first.
So there's been a variety of department heads and representatives who said that they wish to speak tonight. Is there anybody who'd like to volunteer to go first, or someone remotely who'd like to get up and speak and go first? Come on up. Okay. Good evening. Please introduce yourself. And so we've got until 6:30, so I'm probably going to let, depending on how much testimony there is, I'll let it go maybe till a little bit past 6 o'clock, and then we can reserve the rest of the time for councilors to speak. So,
City Council, good afternoon. Rebecca Ocasio, Deputy Director for 911. City Council, as you know, we have a highly competitive job market currently, and 911 is a very essential role in public safety. With 911, we do request a great deal of dedication and sacrifice from an applicant when they choose a career in 911. We're asking for them to work evenings, overnights, holidays, their children's birthdays, the 4th of July. We're asking them to work long hours. We're asking them to stay late. We're asking them to come in early. But what we're also asking from them, on top of what surrounding communities are asking, is that we're asking for them to be a resident at the same time. Springfield Communications, we just can't compete with the other 911 centers in the area because we are asking for residency above and beyond what everybody else is asking for. These are not well-paid positions. They don't come with a great deal of benefits, and they do take a lot of sacrifice from people in order for them to take those positions. What we're finding is that although we are able to hire telecommunicators, within that year, we're finding that other surrounding communities are making offers and offering positions that are highly attractive to our dispatchers, and we're losing them to those surrounding communities because what we're giving them is what I would say is the best training in the area, a great deal of experience, because we do run high acuity calls here in Springfield. Unfortunately, we do deal with issues like the officer-involved shooting that we managed a couple of weeks ago. These are high acuity, difficult incidents that the 911 telecommunicators are dealing with, and it leaves them in a great position for these other communities to come in and hire our 911 professionals. In 2017, we had a very accomplished dispatcher that unfortunately was unable to maintain residency within the city because he was unable to sell his home in another community within the 1-year time frame, because he was what we would call upside down on that property. He wasn't able to get his money back. That 911 dispatcher is still a telecommunicator and works in one of our surrounding communities and is highly successful even on the state level in 911, and he should have still been with us. In 2022, one of our QA professionals, their apartment was being sold out from under them that they were renting, and they needed to secure great housing for their family that they were not able to do on the wages that we were paying them here in Springfield. Unfortunately, that team member had to accept a position at the regional dispatch center local to us because he couldn't secure housing for his family within the city. In 2023, we had a dispatcher who unfortunately suffered divorce in her personal life and needed support of family, and there were some domestic concerns surrounding that divorce. She had to move out of the community and therefore resigned, knowing that she could no longer reside in Springfield. In 2024, a dispatcher requested a waiver because his mother had fallen ill and needed support in the home, and he wished to move in with his mother in order to care for his mother. That request was denied, and I ask you to ask yourself how much longer that dispatcher might remain with us, knowing that he's unable to move in with his ill mother, unable to care for her when she needs it. City Council, I know that the intent of the residency requirement is entirely good, but I do ask you if you would put yourself in the position of our 911 professionals and ask yourselves what you would do when there are so many 911 centers in the area with lower call volume, higher pay, and they are not requesting residency.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. How about, would Drew and Caitlin, would you be willing to speak on behalf of HR, just generally what you're experiencing with this, and Drew, what we're dealing with on the commission as chair of the Residency Compliance Commission? Would the two of you be willing to speak next? Okay. And then Helen Carlton-Harris has her hand raised, so Commissioner, we'll get to you right after Caitlin and Drew.
So my name is Caitlin Julius. I'm the Assistant HR Director for the City of Springfield. I'm going to focus my talking on the impacts to the city, not necessarily the staffing of my departments. The residence requirement has a significant impact on recruitment, training, and retention. In FY22 and FY23, 20% of our hires were non-residents. Of those hires, we lost 7% of them within the first year of their employment. As of today, we have 22 employees that need to move to the city within their 1 year of employment. Our job postings average 50+ days because of our inability to fill those positions. My team is out recruiting at various events around the city. We've seen a lot of you at these events. We're at the pancake breakfast, we're at the pride events, we're in the local community colleges. And we're routinely asked, is residency really a requirement? Are you really serious about this requirement, and do you check it? We're losing candidates before they even fill out our applications, before they can even interview. Right now, there's an estimated 11,000 baby boomers retiring a day. There's a need for workers, and there's competition all around us. We need to be able to staff our city positions and staff them with the best candidates to get these jobs done. I understand fully, and I know the waiver process in and out, but that process also significantly adds to our timeline for hiring, and more times than not, when we finally get that waiver, we've already lost that candidate because someone else has picked them up. The waivers also tie you to that position without any flexibility for promotion. We need to be able to grow our own, especially since we see some big retirements looming in the future. How can we promote and encourage people to stay with the city if they're tied to a position based on a waiver? We have so much talent within this city that we become a training ground for the surrounding municipalities. I can't tell you how many employees that we have lost to Chicopee. We are hiring employees, we're training them, and they leave us for other municipalities that do not have that residency requirement. I can tell you last year, Chicopee posted all their seasonal positions with the headline, "We do not require residency." So the surrounding communities know it, and they use it to get our people in the doors. We have to be mindful that situations change. We hire people that have the full intentions to live here forever, or the full intention to move here within a year, but things change within their lives, and then they can no longer do that. We also routinely get calls about relocation assistance, which we do not and cannot offer, the cost of rent within the city, and the inability to move within a year's time frame. We are working tirelessly in my department to recruit and hire the right candidates for our positions. We're coming up with these creative and unique ways like walk-in Wednesdays, HR on the road to recruit, but the factor is that there are things weighing against us like residency, so we can't fill these roles that we need to fill.
Thank you. Thank you, Caitlin, for the testimony. Just for everybody, for councilors' benefit, I did talk to Attorney Mahoney today. He has litigation that is ongoing that is somewhat related to this exact subject, so he was not willing to testify tonight for that reason. So thank you, Caitlin.
You're welcome.
Okay. Drew. By the way, I also just want to say that this is an incredibly personal subject. It feels like, tensions are a a little high, maybe even in this room. People are uncomfortable talking about it. We're talking about where people live and how people have a condition of employment. And I just want to acknowledge that and thank everybody for being here and being candid with their perspectives. I understand that it's not an easy thing to talk about. So go ahead, Drew.
Thank you, Mr. President. I myself was appointed to the Residency Compliance Commission with President Fenton when it first got commissioned. I serve as the co-chair presently. As far as the residency goes, back in when we all started negotiating that, I happened to be union president at the time. So I was like, I referred to President Fenton too. We were on the front lines of all this. We knew what a hot topic it was for the city and the city councilors. You know, it's been implemented and bargained. To sit and listen to the department heads when they come in was pretty eye-opening for me. Just, I'm more on the public safety side, but to hear DPW and hear Commissioner Desolate and all that talk about the hiring practices and how it's affecting their employment opportunities for their departments, they're not getting the candidates that they need to get the quality candidates hired. You know, and the residency is definitely what they refer back to as besides wages as well. So originally, I think everybody thought that the Residency Compliance Commission was going to be the enforcement commission of the ordinance, which we oversee the enforcement of the ordinance, but also we need to keep an open mind and listen to the other side of the ordinance and how is the ordinance affecting the city and the taxpayers in the city of Springfield. And right now, when you listen to the department heads and they're coming in and telling us that they can't hire this guy to replace street signs, DPW can't get mechanics, Desolate's hiring building inspectors that they're investing all these hours and money into training them, and then they're getting certified and they're jumping ship to the surrounding towns. And I asked the council to keep an open mind. Like President Fenton said, it's tough to have an unpopular discussion, but right now the discussion needs to be had, and we can't bury our heads. I've sat in with Caitlin, you know, just asking her. The hiring practices have changed since we implemented residents as well. There's more social media involved. She's having job fairs at the training center. When I took the test to get on the job, there was over 2,000 people lined up to take the exam. They were all over the city at all the junior high schools now. We're lucky if we get 200 people. Yeah, like I said, I sat in on her her job seminars, and maybe 40 people. That's not a lot, and that's not how we're not going to get the best candidates. And like I said, I would like the council to keep an open mind and listen to everything that's presented in front of them. Like President Fenton said, we're not here to change the ordinance tonight. We're just here to get the discussion started. Unpopular as it might be, but it needs to be had. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. Okay, so Commissioner Carlton Harris.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am grateful for your time, and thank you, councilors. The way in which the residency ordinance has impacted the Department of Health and Human Services in the area of the healthcare workforce shortage. Physicians, dentists, dental hygienists, behavioral health specialists, registered nurses, nurse practitioners. We are not able to attract those individuals based on the residency requirement. And again, we are facing a healthcare workforce shortage, but residency also becomes a barrier for us as well. TJO, the Animal Control Center, we service Holyoke and Chicopee. It needs to be fair that we are able to hire individuals from those two cities, and we have been able to get waivers, but it should be a practice that individuals are able to hire from those particular two cities, Chicopee and Holyoke. They do pay us for their services, so it would seem to me we would want to consider their residents. Finally, I would say that all of us have a job to do as far as the perception of living in the city of Springfield. Oftentimes, people we hire hear very negative things or are not fully informed of how really special this city is and what it has to offer. So I would hope that we will also think about how we talk positively about the place we live and the reason it's important to live here. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you, city councilors, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Commissioner. We have another person remote who would like to testify, Tracy Rondinello.
Hello. My name is Tracy Rondinello, and I'm an animal control officer with Thomas J. O'Connor Animal Control and Adoption Center. We do provide 24/7, 365-day services to Springfield, Chicopee, and Holyoke, which consists of about 250,000 residents total. There are currently only 5 animal control officers, and there's been a vacant position since February 2024. We also currently do not have a shelter veterinarian and are no longer able to provide the full services to animals in need. And the residence requirement is causing that issue because there's a lack of veterinarians in our current community. Right now, with our city issues with the residency requirement, our goal is to hire the best candidates, not just the best of what's currently in Springfield. We have these vacancies left in our department, and we've been struggling for quite some time to fill them, that some staff have to work 50 to 60 hours a week, or sometimes even 10 days in a row. So it's leaving us in a very difficult place for the current staff members that have moved here, have put their families on hold, and to stay in the city and commit to this job. There have also been a personal time where I was currently homeless after getting an abuse protection order, and I still had to remain in the city. So it was very difficult for me with the residency requirement. I did not want to lose my job. I had to struggle to find housing in a time frame where the city thankfully allowed me to take a leave. But I am still here after all that. I'm willing to stick around, but due to the residency requirement, I'm no longer in a safe area. I no longer feel comfortable wearing a uniform in public in my neighborhood, let alone driving a city vehicle there. So it's a lot of things that add up to it, that I'm here for a reason. I'm in a law enforcement uniform. I want the people to be comfortable with me, but in the neighborhood, I just don't feel comfortable with it. So that is a personal matter, but mainly our department is just really struggling getting good candidates. And just because of the services that we provide, what we have to do, being on the front lines with first responders, again, 24/7, 365, it takes a toll on a lot of people that even if we do have some interviews, people really find out what this job does entail, and they no longer feel up to the status. It's a lot of work to do this job. We work hand in hand with police a lot, and it takes a toll on people. And sometimes this is just a struggle to stay in this position longer. Right now, our staff that we have currently have been the longest staff that we had, and we have finally recruited 2 more people that just hit their 1-year mark. But we're hoping to have another officer that would help us not be working up to 10 days in a row at a time, or 50, 60 hours. It's hard to get somebody that's currently in our community to actually take that position.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Council.
We have some other folks who signed up to speak. I'm going to try and get to them before we kick it back to the council. Jean Canosa Albano.
Good evening, President Fenton, and to the rest of the councilors who are here or online. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I'm bringing some remarks on behalf of Library Director Molly Fogarty. I'm Jean Canosa Albano, the Assistant Director at the Springfield City Library. And so in brief, a lot of people have touched on some issues that we also deal with. Caitlin Julius brought up some stats that are pretty powerful. But I embrace residency as a concept, and as you know, my life, if you were next to me, you'd see I've got City of Springfield map on my earrings that I wear every day. So I love living in the city. I see the benefits, and thank you, Commissioner Colton Harris, for bringing that up as part of recruitment. But the residency requirement does affect recruitment and retention of library workers, especially of degreed librarians. So when we post jobs out in the library world, we always mention that residency is required. The City of Springfield has a residency requirement. It allows new hires up to a year to establish residency. So in today's job market, transparency is a must, and that applies to residency as well as salary. And most jobs at the Springfield City Library require a Master's of Library Science. Only about 5,000 of those are conferred every year, compared to about 150,000 master's degree of education, which makes competition for great candidates, the kind of librarians we Springfield residents deserve, fierce. Many people are attracted to work at Springfield City Library due to our reputation for innovative, responsive, and creative programming and services, the opportunity to work in a place with a diverse population, our career ladders, our collaborative colleagues, many city amenities and attractions, and our competitive salaries. However, the residency requirement has been a real stumbling block. Anecdotally, we have learned that many people do not apply to work here, knowing they will not be able to comply with the requirement. We will often field emails during the job posting period with potential candidates asking how seriously the City of Springfield takes the residency requirement. And during screening interviews, we always mention that residency is a requirement, and sometimes people choose to withdraw from the process after learning that the requirement is firm. We don't often get applications from people living in commuting distance to Springfield. It would seem that it is difficult to justify moving across city limits to take a job within 10 to 30 minutes drive from where you live now, particularly in today's housing market. We've been more likely to hire people from out of state who are interested in locating to this region, including people who came to us from New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, California, Oklahoma, Florida, Louisiana. So these folks often need a delayed start date given the logistics of moving and finding housing here from afar. Two particular recruitment pain points: part-time positions that do not offer the potential employee access to health insurance, making the short number of hours even more difficult for candidates to manage with an additional burden of self-insurance, and leadership positions that require more experience of candidates because with a longer resume often comes established roots, kids in school, partners with competing residency or proximity needs, or newly constructed or purchased homes in other communities. We have experienced all of these reasons for people to bypass working at Springfield City Library. And for some, knowing that there is a year to achieve residency has been encouraging, like Boston Public Library and the City of Boston in general require residency on day one. But we have had people withdraw signed letters of job acceptance when they can't find housing that they can afford that fits their family's needs. So someone who wanted to move here fleeing the unending cycle of wildfires in California. But it also, we were really scared about one of our more newly hired managers not being able to find something in Springfield as her year anniversary drew close. Those who do sign on or have struggled to find affordable, suitable housing within the year have really struggled with this. Because we, the Human Resources Department and the Residency Committee, all take the requirement seriously and diligently explain it to candidates, we've not had to terminate many people's employment due to their noncompliance with the ordinance, but it has happened a number of times. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we've got 4 more people who signed up to speak, so I'm going to call them, but if you could please just try and keep it to a couple of minutes. I'm sure you've got a lot to say, but just if you could be brief, please. Greg Superno. I'll use the clock so it's more obvious. I invested in it, so I might as well.
Thank you,
Go
thank you,
ahead, Mr.
President
Superno.
Fenton. Yeah, Director Signoli submitted a memo summarizing it, so I won't read that here. But just to echo the sentiments of Caitlin and Drew, we are essentially becoming the training ground for other municipalities. We are finding it difficult to retain talented people with sought-after certifications. Engineers are leaving for Mass DOT. CDL drivers are leaving for Water Sewer Commission, in which we pay comparable wages to them, but they don't have a residency ordinance. We're losing CDL drivers to adjacent municipalities. We're always short positions, skilled positions especially. Like I said, mechanics are at a premium these days, and finding qualified backfills is challenging enough, but when you restrict the pool to city residents, it makes it nearly impossible. And we're also losing qualified candidates who live in the city of Springfield that still aren't putting their name in the ring. We had an engineering graduate. She was a city of Springfield resident. She had graduated from Wennick, but when I tendered the offer of employment to her, she said, does this mean I have to live in the city my entire life, I said, well, for the duration of your employment, you would. And she turned the job down. So it's a well-intentioned ordinance, but in today's job market, it's becoming cumbersome. I will share one other anecdote. I had a person who applied for a maintenance craftsman position, which is not one of our higher paid positions. It's in the low $20 range. Very enthusiastic about joining the city of Springfield workforce, but unfortunately, that gentleman shared a house with his in-laws in Holyoke. So the costs of rents are so prohibitive now, and the cost of housing is so high that he could not even agree to move to the city within a year because it would be too much of a financial burden for someone making that salary. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Superno. Okay, next is Jason Garner, 311. Is Jason here? I don't see Jason. Okay, Gladys Loyola Lopez.
And counselors, Jason submitted something in writing. I think Kelly may have sent it out by email. My name is Gladys Loyola Lopez. As Councilor Fenton noted, I'm also on the Residency Commission, and being a member of the Residency Commission has been an eye-opener. I'm a lifelong resident of the city of Springfield, huge believer in residency. I think the pendulum at this point has swung the other way. When I first started working for the city of Springfield, I was 19, worked here for 2 years, and at that time it was before Mayor Albano in '95 decided that residency, there was going to be a big push for residency in the city. And at that time, I think everybody was pretty much gung-ho that, you know, you had to live in the city of Springfield in order to have a stake in where you work. And I would say that the theory is that employees who are residents are more committed to the community, that they pay taxes in the community, they own homes, they use the schools. My daughters are public school students here as well. And you can argue that it is fair to obligate us to work here if in exchange for our paycheck. As almost a lifelong resident, I would say that if we hire the best and the brightest for any job in the city, we as Springfield taxpayers, we deserve that, right? So you're not going to go to a doctor because he lives close to you. You want the best doctor no matter how far away they are. We travel to Boston to get better health care than we do if the specialist isn't here in Springfield. As a cabinet head, I hope that we can recruit from within the city's borders. But as a realist, I would argue that Springfield is different now than it was decades ago when the councilors then had to vote and require cities to live, residents to work and live in the city. I would say that I've seen people who've come to me who I know that work in the city of Springfield. They don't live in the city of Springfield. They have a physical address in the city of Springfield where they get mail, but are fearful. And these are jobs that aren't the six-figure jobs that some people hold in the city. These are entry-level positions where they make $40,000 a year, and they need these jobs to feed their family, single parents, some of them. And we are requiring them to live in a city where the rent is $1,800 for a 3-bedroom apartment. I know some people who have purchased homes in the city, they're kind of upside down in these homes. They're over $300,000, single parents, and get paid less than $60,000 and are required to live in the city of Springfield. They can't live in Chicopee, Holyoke. Meanwhile, on the flip side of the situation, I've had people who've left. They've come work in Springfield and have left, now work in Longmeadow, East Longmeadow, Holyoke, West Springfield, and have taken their talents to those cities because there is no residency requirement. So I ask that, and I wanted to thank all of you for taking the time to just start the conversation, because I think that I don't follow the rules. I'm going to be like some of you and say that this is just the beginning of a long conversation, but I think that residency requirement kind of has seen better days at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Gladys. Okay, and the last one who signed up to speak is Kathy Bono. Kathy, I know this has come up in a lot of budget hearings.
I won't take 2 minutes to listen.
Okay, I won't even start the clock for you.
So I'm just speaking in what I heard from all the department heads and all the budget hearings, that it is a challenge. I am a lifelong resident of Springfield, and I believed in the residency. I don't envy you now because it has become such a challenge. Aside from, I mean, some people have to move for family reasons. I hear, and I have to, I mean, I have a 2.5 mortgage. I would never try to sell my house and get a mortgage at 7% right now. I mean, that's just the reality. People who have mortgages from 3 or 4 years ago, there's no way they're going to sell to buy a house in Springfield. And now, and this is shocking to me, inspections are just an FYI. You don't negotiate, you don't do anything. You're buying that house based on the sale price. Most of the time, you're paying over sale price, and you're now getting a 7% interest rate. So it is a challenge. I don't have an answer, but it is something that all the departments are struggling with. We aren't getting the best candidates. We have to acknowledge that. And that's a problem, especially with some of the jobs that require certain skills, certain education. We just aren't. I don't have an answer. I wish I did. But it is something that I'm glad the council is starting to discuss it and realize that we have to acknowledge that this is a problem right now.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other participants online or in person who really want to say something to the council before we open it up for discussion among the council? No? Okay. So, councilors, just speaking for myself, this is, by having this meeting and even acknowledging the issues that have been created as a result of this enforcement, it's a pretty healthy dose of humble pie being served to myself. I mean, I was one of the architects of this current system and advocate for it. But given the testimony that I've heard, I've felt compelled to bring it forward and not sort of play some measure of interference in keeping that information from the council. So, from my perspective, we fought for residency really hard because of the hope that it would help the tax base, it would help a really struggling Springfield housing market, that it would get us employees who are more committed, might even help with public safety to have a cop living next door or a fireman living next door or what have you. And I think it probably achieved all those things. What's changed from my lens is that we've got a lot of people who in the job market can work remote for most jobs now. We are in a more competitive job market as the city being employer than at any point when we contemplated enforcement of this. And you just see it in the overall numbers of employees who are applying for positions, not just in the city of Springfield, but at restaurants and at manufacturing facilities all across the economic spectrum. And so we have to be cognizant of being competitive in a way that we didn't have to worry about 10 or 15 years ago. The city jobs were highly sought after, and there was a line out the door for who was going to fill those positions. So, and the other thing, I think Kathy just sort of hit on it in the end of what I was going to reference, is the other thing that's changed is Springfield's housing market is a lot stronger than it was when we were trying to sort of artificially prop it up in a way with this requirement. And, if you compare it to a lot of the surrounding cities and towns, even some of the, more suburban surrounding communities, our housing prices don't go for that much less than the surrounding places. So, so with that, if councilors have anything that they'd like to add or questions for department heads, I'd invite folks to do that now. If no one has anything to add, then we can conclude this informational session and, determine as the months and time goes by if there is some type of fix that's needed. Are there any councilors? Councilor Walsh?
Well, I'm just wondering, first of all, it's kind of disappointing to hear to me that people don't want to live in the city of Springfield, which has been my home for many years. But I'm wondering, is it only living here? Are there other issues? Is it just housing? Is it schools? I mean, do people give other reasons why they don't want to take these jobs?
I think you're going to have a hard time getting someone to answer that. But I mean, I think it's just another, I think what you might find that most department heads would agree with is that for every person it's different,
Yeah.
but having this requirement is on top of all of the other competitive issues that exist in the job market, and it can become, the straw that breaks the camel's back that leads to us not getting someone.
I'd have to say it is, well, annoying to me that our employees are being stolen by other communities. I do not like that.
Councilor Delgado?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would say I have to agree with my colleague, Councilor Walsh. That was actually going to be one of my questions I asked is, what is the true lying reason, right? And I know that for many folks and families, there are unique circumstances, as was mentioned here. But there's a challenge in my head because, and if I can be blunt and honest, I've heard folks talk about stuff in the past, and a lot of folks were like, I don't want to send my kids to the school system. That was the number one thing I heard before. So when I hear examples, unique examples, I think that's an outlier. When I think about pay, I'm like, are we really not paying our folks that much in comparison to other communities? And pay is a separate issue, I think, from residency. But I know we're not going to get that answer today. What I can say is that I definitely understand what you guys are going through, because you guys are not unique in this challenge. I think everybody currently hiring right now is having unique challenges hiring in general. Set aside the residency. It's the same challenge that's happening at the state level. The state level, it's the same exact thing. We can't find people to work. We can't find folks. So I think we are just in a very unique time where, as you mentioned, it's an employee's market right now to pick and choose. And ever since COVID, it's made that much harder, as you mentioned about the hybrid, and particularly in specialty fields like healthcare, law enforcement, teaching. Those are all folks that I've also heard from. I sit here and chuckle a little bit because it wasn't too long ago that having a government job was like the envy of a lot of people. And I say that from experience, being somebody who remember applying after college. I graduated in 2008, right during the recession, and everybody's like, well, become a substitute teacher. Everybody's hiring, right? And I remember applying there, and I couldn't get a job. And it was only a few days later, I met somebody who was connected, who was on the school committee. I had met him through a mutual friend, and I got a call 2 days later. So part of me, feels like having a government job, trying to get a toll job, that was it. You made it. What the heck happened to local jobs, state jobs? In my opinion, assumption is they have a history of having patronage and nepotism. And I do know that there are folks that would love to apply and work for jobs in cities and state government, but fear that they will never get the call. They will never, because they don't know anybody. So that is a reality that I think we also have to be cognizant of. If us as government entities, we've created that, and that still happens. So I want to make sure that I put that piece out, that there are folks that do want to apply for stuff that won't. And then I guess one of my last things I'm trying to understand is how many of these positions that we have that we can't fill are highly specialized in the sense that you need a specific training to do the job versus being able to learn on the job. Because I've heard a couple mentions of degrees, and college degree opened the door for me. But in today's society, I don't think a degree should be the only factor that you should be hiring somebody off of. I think there are very many talented people in our community that have skill sets that don't get opportunities because we look at a degree as a piece that we keep them out. So I'm just curious to know within this list, and I'm going to keep an open mind to this because I'm a big proponent of residency, but I'd like to understand more of these positions, how many of these are truly specialized positions that you need a degree versus something you can learn on the job. So that'd be my 2 cents.
Thank you. Councilor Davila.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for calling this meeting. My apologies to the department heads and everybody standing behind me as I kind of look at you as I got to speak into the microphone. Mr. President, thank you for calling this meeting. I know this is a hard conversation to have, and to be honest with you, I got so many questions that the next half an hour is not going to be enough. So I will try to keep it as brief as possible. And I don't know who I asked who to address this question, but Mr. President, perhaps you can shine some light into my questions here. You did mention, and some of the speakers did mention, about the housing market in Springfield, which is not a secret. We all know that. The average housing in Springfield has increased by about 33%. As it was mentioned, the interest rates are going up. So I could totally see that as a very serious concern for anybody relocating to the city, not to mention that we do have a housing crisis, that even the residents that live here in the city of Springfield now are having difficulty finding not only housing, but appropriate housing. I totally get that. So my question is, do we have some sort of I don't know how to call it, some sort of a committee / group of people that can say, hey, welcome to the city of Springfield. These are the schools you might want to check out. These are the hospitals. These are the current housing in the area. We are just kind of like helping them transition onto the city life. Do we have anything similar to that?
I'll just answer from my knowledge. I'm not aware of any municipal function that does that. There was a nonprofit organization called Choose Springfield at one point that did some of that work. But Caitlin, do you want to weigh in on that? Looks like you have something to say.
So we have a onboarding page through NeoGov that we put out information pertaining to working for the city. It covers everything from your orientation to residency and different resources that you can utilize. We also work one-on-one with our employees that do need to relocate, and we have, different avenues that we give them, whether it's Zillow links, information about the different neighborhoods within Springfield, things along those lines that we do give out to our employees.
Wait, I'm sorry, Caitlin, I did miss the beginning of what you say. So we do have what, you said?
It's called an onboarding platform through NeoGov. It's like a welcome to the city employment page once you're hired. That has different information on it.
And it has all that information that I'm referring to?
Yes, yep, and then we email it to employees as well.
Okay, thank you, Caitlin. I'm glad to see that. Good,
welcome.
good. Mr. President, the other question that I have is, once, I'm trying to get the benefit of the doubt here. Once somebody comes in, and I could totally see somebody not finding housing in Springfield within a year, I could at least a housing that they prefer. I could totally see that. Do we have any mechanism to give them some sort of extension?
We do not.
We do not. With a 4 or 6 months extension? Okay.
Just says,
Just as
I will take responsibility for that. I wrote it. It says 12 months. And that's it.
Well, I don't think
It's a cliff.
you could have foreseen, Mr. President, in the future at the time. If you did, you would not be here. You'd be somewhere else. So I think, okay. Now, one thing, Mr. President, that I will say is that every single person that came up to the podium say the same thing. I support residency, but I support residency, but in the past, comments have been made by other departments, which I'm not going to name them specifically, who have said that we have trouble finding people to work here because they cannot pass a drug test. We have heard comments of department heads coming here saying that they don't have the education. And there's some specialized jobs, I get that. Jobs that I probably couldn't even do myself or anybody here in this humble and wise chambers because they're highly specialized. I get that. And I see that the whole conversation has been centered towards the residency. Fair point. Where I do believe the conversation should be going, Mr. President, should be in relooking at the wages, starting with the law department, which I have said publicly before. We need to reevaluate a wage structure to attract the best of the best, like it was said. You build it, they will come. I am very concerned, and I know you have said, Mr. President, that there's no proposal right now at the table. That is the beginning of the conversation. I get it. But we also need to be careful what we do. Because this city, somebody said a little while ago, what did this person say? I don't want to misquote this person. This city is not the city that I knew, or something to that effect. I'm going to take that kindly, that comment. But I've also been on the street, and I have heard some more comments that really give me a lot of pause. Our current employees that work for the city of Springfield. And I get it. Everybody wants the best for their family, what they think is best. But I believe in Springfield, we all believe in Springfield. And I do believe that what we should start is relooking at the wages. I have a plethora of questions, a plethora of the comments, Mr. President, which I'm not engaged with. But at least I think in my part, if there's no objection, Mr. President, I will call a meeting of the general government to start looking at possibly granting an extension if the housing is not found within a year. Because I think that's a very fair point. Of everything that I heard today, I think the most sensible thing that I heard today was about the housing and not finding housing. I don't know what that's going to look like. But at least I'm making a commitment that I'll be willing to do that from the General Government Committee.
That'd be great.
Because I think that I hear what they have to say, but I'm concerned. I'm very concerned that we move quickly, and I know I've been around for a little while now, and so we need to be very careful how we do this. And so I do look forward to engaging more department heads. And I say to all the department heads, if you want to contact me privately and you want to talk to me about this and give me your thoughts, please do so. I would love to hear your thoughts and your comments and your ideas. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Davila. Councilor Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I want you to know that you don't have to die on the sword as the architect of this.
Thank you.
This was passed by a majority vote of the council, and I was one of the supporters, and many of the colleagues that are still on the council were supporters of it. Many of our colleagues that have moved on were supporters of it. We felt at the time it was the right thing to do, and I stand by that. At the time, it was. We were trying to address inequity within hiring and the ideal that money should circulate within our community, and that's biblical. The more times that a dollar circulates or is touched in our neighborhood, the more benefit it is to our community. So you don't have to be the only person to take credit for the creation of this. But the city has changed, and everybody brings their own perspective to why this is a problem and how difficult it is. It's complicated. The solution will have to be multifaceted, and we have to look at it from a multitude of opinions and views. There are people who think that it's just a matter of whether the city of Springfield can compete in regarding wages. Well, I can tell you that I retired for 21 years of service for the Department of Mental Retardation, which is now Department of Mental Health. I worked at 2 institutions and left one 6 months before they closed, left the other one 2 years before they closed. And the point being that I retired in 2009, not earning $40,000 a year. And my wife, I had 21 years of service as a state employee, and my wife had 17 years of service as a state employee. And we retired not because of love of money, but love of each other. because of the positions we were in and with the institutions closing, my wife was going to be put on Tuesdays and Wednesdays for days off on second shift. I had weekends off on first shift. And if I professed to love her more than my next breath, when was I supposed to spend time with her? So it wasn't about the wages. And our agreement was that we would prefer to eat tuna fish and peanut butter and be together than make money. 15 years later, I'm sitting here in this chamber having the discussion to try to refute the thought that it's just about the wages, because as a city and just going through the budget process, there's no way we can compete with all of the other communities that might be looking to hire. If you look across the country and across the world, there is a shortage of employees, not a shortage of jobs, but a shortage of employees. In this particular country, the definition of being poor is certainly not what it is in other parts of the world, but it's a matter of whether you're willing to settle for, because you can live and what the standard in which I and my wife are willing to live at with the salaries and income that we earned is different than what somebody else is willing to do. So we can't outbid Chicopee, Holyoke, and Longmeadow. On the other side, we've been in this chamber and been in the side room and listened to Chris Signoli talk about how difficult it is to be able to hire plowers when he's trying to compete with those other communities. And it's not about the wages. It's not about the bonus. It's about the fact that they can drive a truck in a community where there's very little on-street parking. So they're not tearing up the transmission of their trucks, and they don't have to wait for tow trucks to come plow, move cars out of the way, and it's just easier job to do, and the wages are close. There are certain positions like veterinarians and doctors and dentists and stuff who do need to have the education, and you can't ignore that. That's just the way it's going to be. And there's not enough of them. There are not enough veterinarians for this entire community in Western Massachusetts anyway. And you can just go down the list, and that's why I'm just simply saying that it is complicated. The desire to have people local working is admirable and is something we should strive to do. But it's complicated because there is a perception issue of the city of Springfield not being the best place to live by some people. For somebody in my case who's been here in 1959 and lived here all my life, I love the city of Springfield. I have no desire to get wealthy enough to live anywhere else. And I want to be a part of the problems or the solutions to the problems of the city of Springfield. This is not as simple as just creating more housing opportunities or competitive wages. It's going to be a recognition that the world is not like it was when we put this ordinance together. The city of Springfield is not like it was, and the solution can't be as simple as just one thing. We do need to have competitive wages, but we also have to recognize that people will leave money on the table to live where they perceive to be safer, or where they perceive to the schools to be better, or where they just feel like they have the choice of where they live. Some people will not apply just simply because it is a requirement, and they believe that that is an infringement on their constitutional right of choice. So the thing is as we move forward, and as my colleague holds meetings, and as people part ideals, it's not that we necessarily have to tear down completely or the ideal of residency and its benefits, but we just also have to recognize that there's a reason why we don't have a Trader Joe's in Springfield. And it's not just about the numbers of people. We don't have a Dave Buster's. It was 12 years ago that I wrote the letter to Texas looking to try to get a Dave and Buster's here. It had nothing to do with the number of traffic driving past the Basketball Hall of Fame. It had to do with the wages that our people in our community were earning, and they were looking at the population beyond just the numbers. So I'm just simply saying, first of all, that you don't have to stand there and be the only person getting, blamed for this where we are.
Thank you.
Because there was at least 8 other councilors voting with you when we did it, and there was opposition when we did it. But the solution has to be multifaceted. It's going to be complicated. It's going to make people uncomfortable. And we're going to have some uncomfortable conversations if we really want to try to implement and create something that's more equitable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. Councilor Whitfield.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to be as brief as possible because I know we had to jump. But I'm agreeing with a lot that everyone is saying. One thing that I did want to talk about is what Councilor Delgado said, and getting a job at the city of Springfield at one point, you did have to be connected. And I think that people were hiring more of their friends and family that didn't live in the community. And that was one of the main reasons that, like Councilor Edwards said also, is we wanted more equity and inclusion in the hiring practices. And that was one of the main reasons. I don't think it has to be a one-shoe-fits-all. I think that there could be a percentage in each department that can hire outside of the city. I think there's ways that we can come up with creative ways to get other folks in the city of Springfield, working in the city of Springfield, especially if they need those credentials like health and human services need and things like that. In addition, I don't think that residency has anything to do with our employees getting poached to different cities and towns. I think they may be paying better. I don't really think that that one has anything to do with, they're getting trained here and now they're trained and yeah, they're gonna go where there's better wages, or maybe they don't wanna live in Springfield, so they come here for the year, get trained, and then they leave. Now they got a year experience, so it's easier to get hired somewhere else. So maybe putting a 2-year requirement on or something like that, I don't know. But I think that it is a time that we could work together and come up with the creative ways to help the city. It is a different time. As far as housing goes, we are one of the cheapest neighborhoods in the city for housing, even when purchasing housing, because my son is moving to Boston and it is double the rent for a smaller place to live. So we are one of the more, even though rent is still very high for low-income families, we are still one of the lower communities when it comes to renting and purchasing homes. So I just wanted to say those things. I do feel for the department, especially the dispatch department, and especially, well, all the departments, because they offer services to the residents of the city of Springfield. And so I look forward to continuing the conversations. But I am a proponent of residency because I actually worked in a time when there was no residency, and I've seen the nepotism and cronyism and the things happening in the city of Springfield. And the residency requirement kind of helped to tailor that, so not so much of that was going on. But I think I voted on it. I don't know if I was here at the time, but I think I voted on it if I was here. So, Mr. President, you were not alone. I still do agree with it to a certain degree, but we can always just tailor it a bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Whitfield. Any other councilors? Okay. Seeing none, we do have proclamations tonight, one from Councilor Click Bruce. I think we should conclude this meeting, and Councilor Davila has offered to have at least a general government committee in the future, whether that's the summer or fall. I do think, Caitlin and the HR department, it seems like based on this conversation, there's a couple things that would be helpful to us. I don't know if you're able to generate this, but if you could develop maybe some comparative data to how Springfield's compensation for municipal employees stacks up to others in the area, in Hampden County, other public employers, and then also what other cities have residency requirements in Massachusetts, and what are their experiences like with that? Because I'm not aware of any other one in Hampden County that has one currently, but I know Boston has one, and outside of that, I'm not familiar. I know there was a lawsuit a few years ago in Lowell, so that would be helpful data to have, I think, as we go forward with this conversation. What are other people doing with residency, and how do we stack up on compensation? Councilor Davila.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I do not. I would love to hold that meeting on the general government. And Caitlin, if you may, I would like to see some data also, particularly on housing, because that did catch my attention. I don't know if you have that information, or it has to go by department, but I would love to know how many people have turned down jobs specifically because of housing issues, whether they cannot find housing or they cannot afford the housing in the city of Springfield. I think that's something that we should know. Now, I'm thinking, Mr. President, perhaps we'll be going away Thursday, so maybe in August, I could call this meeting, because I do believe we're not meeting in July, correct?
Yeah, there is absolutely no rush to this. This problem did not get created overnight. It's not going to be solved overnight.
I agree.
It might not even be solved in 2024.
So I'm thinking August, but Caitlin, if you could give me that information between here and there, that would be deeply appreciate it.
So it's hard to capture how many people have turned down jobs because of residency. You know, sometimes we just get emails saying that they're turning it down. HR offers about 95% of the jobs, but some departments do offer the jobs on their own, so that's not data we're capturing. I can definitely capture the amount of people that are leaving within that first year that needed to move. That I can capture. I can go back a couple years and get that type of data.
That's right. Whatever you can capture that will give us some sort of a sense as it relates to housing. And again, you know, as we all know, this is not the solution to the problem, but it's something that to be looked at because it was brought up a couple of times. So,
And the
thank you.
Residency Compliance Commission counselor can probably help with some of that data too.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
we've got a lot of it, and
Yes.
Nicole
And I will be
Blank and
calling
her
them for
team.
the meeting as well, Mr. President.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that will conclude our committee of the whole. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, department heads, and a conversation to be continued.